This is going to be a fun adventure. So are you ready? I'm excited about this. This is a reference photo I got off of Unsplash. It's a beautiful composition. The colors are very muted. We're going to spice it up a little with using some Scarlet Lake for the vase, the pottery vase. We're going to mix some ochre and permanent violet for this painting on the wall. We're going to use some neutral tint on the background. I might drop in a little bit of ochre or this mix. I'm not quite sure. And of course the branches, the sticks will be done with this color as well. Make it very harmonious with that. But we're going to do some fun things with this. We're going to use different things to make some interesting textures. So for this painting here, we're going to use cling wrap. As soon as I put the paint on, I'm going to put this down and let it dry. And for this background, I'm going to use this popping paper. So when I lay the paint down while it's still wet, I'm just going to press this on it and put a book or something on top. And it will make some interesting circles for the background, like a wallpaper or something. And for this, I'm going to lighten the lines here so that I barely see it, because I'm going to use a wax resist crayon. It's just simply a white crayon to make some marks here, so that when I paint the Scarlet Lake over here, it will resist the marks I have, and it'll make some interesting marks there. I might even throw in some salt. I'm not sure. It just depends on my mood at the time. So I'm using a kneaded eraser. You can roll it to get it to lift up some of the excess. You can also use tape to lift up some of the excess. Just press it down. Lindy Pratt, who is an artist I follow on Patreon, she shared recently a tutorial on how to use a lint roller to lift up the excess graphite when doing a trace, and I think that's just brilliant. So I've taken that and I've thought, well, the tape might work too, and it does. So whatever you have, just use it, and let's get started. I'm so excited about this. I love messing with different textures, and the cling wrap can make some really interesting marks on the paper. So I'm just going to take this paint. I probably don't have enough mixed up. I never do. And just paint this wall hanging thing, whatever this thing is. Of course, I don't have enough. That's okay. I can mix it up as I go. It's going to have some interesting textures anyway. And I'm going over the line a little bit. The outside here is a little bit darker, so I'll be adding a shadow there anyway, so it just doesn't matter. Let me get a little bit more. Trying to make it here. Let's splatter some water. That also makes some interesting textures. I want it wet when the cling wrap goes on. So I'm just going to drop in some more paint here and there. Get some interesting marks here. Even if I left it like this, it would look really cool. But I'm going to use this to make it even cooler. So I'm just kind of wadding it up. Just laying it on here. Can you see the interesting marks it's going to make? It's going to be so awesome. Kind of geometric shapes here. Okay, that has got to dry completely. So I'm going to put some weight on it. I've got this palette right here that can just sort of sit right on top. And let that dry and wait till I reveal it. It's going to look so cool. Okay, I think it is dry enough. So I'm going to remove this weight and lift it up. Look at that. Look at the texture and the design. It's just so cool. It's not completely dry because it's still a little warped, but it was dry enough to remove. That is so cool. I love that. Now I'm going to let this completely dry before I add the texture to this background because it's still a little damp. The design's going to stay there. That's just so cool. That's going to look great. So let it dry. Okay, this is completely dry now. So I'm going to paint this background with a pretty watery mix of neutral tint. You could use Payne's Gray. You could make your background any color you want. But I decided to do it kind of this light neutral tint. So I'm just going to wet it completely first. This is the shadow line right there, in case you were wondering. And I'll add that later. I'm going to go over the branches because when I paint the branches, it's going to be thick enough paint that it'll go over with no problem. I am going to avoid the pot, the vase. That noise is my cat running in the room. And now she's running out. She's quite the energetic cat. That's Cucumber. She wants to play. Okay, so I think I've got all of it covered with water. You can tell by holding it up and moving it around to see if every spot is shiny, and I think it is. So I'm just going to drop in some of this diluted neutral tint and just kind of smash it around, smoosh it around. It's going to dry a little lighter than it is right now. Make sure it stays wet. Add more water if you need. If you need more time, as long as it's shiny, you can keep adding paint and water to it. When it starts looking a little bit dull, you've missed that window. Let it dry, and then you can fiddle with it later. Okay, I'm going to sprinkle some water here and there. Just do some splattering. Oh, that's pretty like that. I could just leave that and let that dry. But I wanted to experiment with this packing paper, these little dots. So I'm just going to lay it down here, and then I'm going to set a board on top, and I'm going to weight it down. With some paints. I think that should do it. And then let it dry. when you're out. I ain't missing. It does. Oh, yeah. Come on, Fluffy cat, come on. She gets a treat too. She gets a treat. She's a good kitten. sorry? Oh, yeah. Because I gotta go through, I gotta relive it. And you being turned on turns me on. And it's just and then it's like, hurry up and wash so I can help pick out the next. Because that's kind of I get excited about that. Yeah, I do. Okay, I didn't have the camera going, and all I did was paint this with a Scarlet Lake, and I sprinkled a little bit of table salt here. I'm going to do a little bit more. Yeah, I want some texture here on the pot. And then I'm going to let that dry. Okay, so the salt is dry now, and look at that texture. It's so cool. So I'm just going to scrape this excess salt off. I put a lot on there. Good. Now I'm just going to work on the shadows of the pot, and I'm going to do the Scarlet Lake, and I'm going to mix a little neutral tint in it just to make a darker color. Ooh, that looks purpley. Add more red. The Scarlet Lake. This is dry. Now I'm just making some shading here. And then taking a damp brush. The light's coming from this side because of this shadow right here. So that's why I'm shading this side. Damp brush. I can do the inside of this now. It already has a pretty dark value underneath from the neutral tint. So I'm just going to drop some in, take a damp brush, just kind of tickle those edges. We want it darker at the bottom, which it is. I can go over the top now. Drop some of this pretty concentrated paint right here. It needs to be pretty dark on this side. Careful not to go over the rim, because that's a little bit lighter. Got a little bit of a highlight here, so I'm just doing my lift and wipe. Let's do lift and wipe. up some there. Ooh, that's a lot of paint. I just dropped in a lot of water there. That's okay. I can lift some of it up. I'm gonna let gravity bring it down to the bottom. Let's tickle these edges. Just tickle those edges. Got some salt in here still. That's okay. It can go along for the ride. I just want it darker over there. Lifting a little from the rim. I didn't do a very neat job there. That's okay. Oh, that's pretty. Oh, I love that red. Okay, we're going to let this dry. Okay, it's dry. So I can barely see my lines under here through this red paint, the Scarlet Lake. So I'm just going to make just some little slash marks. Kind of following my guide here. Just using those lines as a guide. And then the next set, I'm just going to do some vertical stripes like what I see in the reference photo. And then another little row of stripes. Oh, that's kind of cool. It looks pretty cool. Now we're going to let this dry. Okay, this is still a little bit wet, but I can work on the edge of this panel thing that's on the wall. So I'm just going to put it upside down so it's a little bit easier for me. And I'm just on the edge here going to use this same mixture, which is the yellow ochre and the permanent violet. A little bit more permanent violet because I want it a little browner. And I'm just going to, I'm going to turn this upside down. I'm going to be doing this right here on this edge, trying to leave some of the light, just like that. That's what I'm working on. And then I'm going to tickle the edges to make it a little smooth. Okay, damp brush. Just kind of tickle those edges. I think I'm going to drop in a little bit of this. Yeah, this is what it needed. Just drop in a little of the neutral tint while it's still wet, because it's pretty dark on this edge. As long as it's wet, you can fiddle with it. That looks really kind of cool. Just making sure that edge is not going to be too hard, so I'm just tickling it again. If you had to paint this design on here, it would take a long time, and that just turned out so cool. It really did. Now let's let that dry. Oh yeah, that looks really pretty cool. I think it could use some more dark, so I'm going to add some more of the neutral. It's still wet, so it's going to accept it well. But it's approaching being dry. Okay, let me do the tickling of the edges. Use your paper towel if you've got stuff going where you don't want it to go. Or just let it go. It doesn't matter. Okay, oh, that's really cool. When I add the shadow, that will really look pretty cool there. Okay, Diane, stop fiddling. Okay, I need to leave that alone, leave it alone. I can't. Okay, I like this pot. That turned out really cool. I like the design, just with the lines. Okay, now I'm going to make a mix for this paint. I noticed the bottom had a little darker value here, so I'm just going to drop that in here. The bottom of this panel. And I'm just tickling those edges. Okay, now I'm going to mix the paint for the branches. I'm going to use about the same color I'm using for that. The yellow ochre and the permanent violet to get me kind of a brownish, real pretty brown color. It's just that. That's probably too yellow. Yeah, that's too yellow. I think I'll add some of the, yeah, that's it. Yeah, oh, that worked. Okay, so the light's coming from this way. So I'm just going to paint these branches just on the right side. Got a cat hair in there. Then I'm going to come in with a damp brush and just kind of tickle that other side and let that paint move to the other side of the stick, the branch. It'll be lighter on that side because I'm using water and not paint. Yellow ochre is a more opaque paint, so it's going over this background pretty well. Now a damp brush. Oops, I forgot this piece, this little branch. Got these little ones up here. These are not the star of the show, so I don't worry about them too much. The star of the show, I think, is this red vase, this pot. It really grabs the attention. And if you think about it, we've got the primary colors. The neutral looks kind of bluish, so you've got red, blue, and yellow. Kind of tickle these edges. Need to do a little lifting here because that background color there, I think that's better. I'm doing a little lifting here and there. A little clean up on aisle 2. Okay, I'm going to add a little neutral tint to this and get a darker, pretty darkish. Oh yeah, that's dark. While this is still wet, I'm going to drop a little bit in just to make it look like a stick, a round stick. Part of this is already dry, which is fine because I'm just going to come in with a damp brush. Just tickle that edge, smooth it out. Do a little bit on this side too. This one's a lot thinner. Needs a little darker value on the right side of the branch. That will give it shape and form. Smooth that edge. Going to do a little bit over here. Don't want to draw too much attention over here because this is not the star of the show. Damp brush, tickle the edges, smooth it. Okay, let's let this dry and see what it looks like. Okay, I think this looks a little washed out over here, so I've mixed up some more of this yellow ochre. Probably did too much smoothing, but that's okay. It's dry, so I'm mixing up another batch of this yellow ochre and the permanent violet. And I'm just going to do another layer over here. I'm just going to glaze over this whole thing. I'm going to use a soft brush to do the glazing so it doesn't disturb the layer below. You're still going to be able to see the texture that was created from the cling wrap. I'm just adding some water. Spread some of this paint out because I don't want to lose that design, and I won't. Oh, that's pretty. I just love that. Okay, this needs to be dry before I before I paint in the shadow, because I'm sure I can't do it without touching that. So let's let it dry. Okay, this is dry, so I'm going to paint in my shadow here. I've got this neutral tint here. I'm not going to paint all the way over there because if you look at the reference photo, there's a little bit of that lighter color right here on the edge. So I'm making sure I leave that. I'm dropping in a pretty intense neutral tint right here at the edge because it would be a bit darker here. Oh, that looks pretty cool. Just smoothing it out a little. I got kind of wild up here with that part of the shadow, but that's okay. Okay, so I'm going to do a darker value for the branches in certain places where I think it needs it. And then take a damp brush, kind of tickle that edge. Yeah, that's giving it more form here. Just going over the right edge here. And then damp brush to smooth it out a little. Okay, let's let this dry and see what we think. Okay, this is dry. So this edge here needs to be darker than the shadow. When you look at this, this has a darker value than the shadow. So I've got the shadow is darker. So I'm just going to add some more of this yellow ochre and permanent violet just on this edge here. It needs to be darker. I'm going to kind of do some little jagged edges, just like it kind of shows in the reference on that side. And then I'm just going to touch that and go down at once. I'm not going to fiddle more than once. That's it. Now I'm going to let this dry and look at it again. Okay, I'm calling this done. I really love all the different textures, all the little triangular things going on here, the oval. We've got some crisscross and some texture here from the salt, the organic shape of the branches. I think it's kind of pretty. I love the red pot. It really, really stands out. I hope this was enjoyable and you learned how to do some new things with the cling wrap and with the popping paper. It really makes an interesting background. Great for making wallpaper. Thank you again for being a subscriber to my Patreon. It means a lot to me and I hope you're getting a lot of value out of it. Thank you so much. This may be a helpful tip for you. Take a picture of your painting laying on its side like this, and if it looks like that yellow ochre painting, that abstract painting that we did, is sticking up from the paper, like this kind of looks like that, then you know you've got your shadows right. If it doesn't look like it's sticking up, then you might need to add more values for your shadows. I hope this was helpful.